Hello, everybody. This is Hyun Park from Amalgam Insights. Thanks for joining us today for TEM Expo webinar for managing SaaS. There's an app for that. For those of you who have been on previous webinars, you have an idea of how this is going to work by now. We're going to spend a quick 25 to 30 minutes talking about this topic and giving you some strategies to help you figure out how to deal with this topic throughout the rest of 2020 with, of course, an eye towards the changes that have happened with this weird context that is that we're all in this post-COVID quarantined world. So to give you an idea of where we are, we are in the upper right-hand corner of this journey. See, we're still got a ways to go until we get to our TEM Expo event. Funny story there that I've actually been working on scheduling this virtual event for about a month and a half now. And funny thing that's happened is I found that all of the virtual event vendors are just booked up throughout June. Just like everything else, there's a huge demand from large companies to push all their events virtually. So there's a good chance this is going to be pushed into July, not because I don't have the content or the speakers, but because I literally can't get a place to hold the event. So just stay tuned there. I'll have an announcement next week finalizing that date. But this means that I'm going to have room possibly for more webinars on the way to the virtual event to be able to cover more topics and to provide more timely advice as we get into that May-June time period. So just something to keep in mind there. So anyways, so why are we doing this TEM Technology Expense Management Expo event and these pre-event webinars? Frankly, because there's a huge need for it right now. If you've noticed, most recently, there was an announcement that first quarter of this year, the GDP is down 4.8% over last year. And remember, the shutdown really just happened around March 10th or so. That's really just 3 weeks of shutdown, and we're already seeing that level of impact on the GDP. So we know Q2 is going to be worse, and we're here to help companies save money by instead of having to cut jobs wherever possible. So I would rather cut costs. And today we're going to talk both about some general practices as well as bringing out the brass knuckles a little bit as we get into Q2 and Q3 and have to really cut costs and do the right thing for our company's sake. So one of the things that makes SaaS, software as a service, a little bit different from other IT spend categories is that this is the most relationship-driven tech category. Apps are a little more personalized than other technology purchases, even mobility, which would be the next most personal, because we pick apps to solve specific use cases in our lives or in our workplaces, often niches that are not handled by large enterprise software platforms or other technologies that exist. And vice versa, on the flip side, SaaS businesses typically think of your business as an ongoing relationship as well, and actually design themselves to not make money off of you in the first year of the relationship. They have to keep you for 2 or more years to start making money and to be profitable. So this is this mutually dependent relationship that is very different from most of technology, which is more business-like and brass tacks and simply about the numbers. There's a relationship aspect to SaaS that makes this spend category a bit different. So to start with, here's a general diagram that I've been using for a couple of years now, talking about disrupting your SaaS environment. And disrupt being an acronym, meaning to discover new apps, inventory all licenses, spend and usage visibility, recycle licenses, unite SaaS categories, because you could often have 5, 10, 15 apps serving the same or a very similar purpose, such as project management or collaboration within your organization, pruning unused services, and then training and enablement, where training is really necessary to both gain adoption and to take full advantage of each app with its discrete and functionalities and capabilities. So, this is mostly straightforward for those of you who are IT pros and procurement pros, finance pros who have done this in other IT spend categories. I'm not going to spend too much time on this other than to point out that if you don't have a process in your organization to do this yet, think about this disrupt framework as a starting point. If you'd like to talk more about this, about how to get started or where to go to get this done from a SaaS perspective, please contact me afterwards. I'd be glad to chat about this. But today, I also want to dig deeper into what to do for the rest of 2020. So we've got some additional tactics that I'm recommending here for a recessionary environment, and there's 6 of them here. One, starting at the upper left-hand corner, benchmark March and April spend. And then next, prepare for tough negotiations. Next, on the right, executive contact with your large accounts and your large spend buckets in your SaaS portfolio. On the bottom left, you see here delay, discount, and dispute. Then prioritize your applications into key priorities versus luxuries versus vanities. And then on the right here, lower right here, you see renegotiating contracts. So we're going to dig into each of these in a little more detail so you have an idea of what to do in each of these areas. So first of all, benchmarking your current March and April usage and activity. Obviously, this is where changes have happened to fundamentally change who is logging on, how often they are using specific functionalities, and then understanding who needs either more or less access to specific apps over time. This is the time to benchmark what your company currently looks like in a remote work type of environment. Now, the sooner you find out this information, the sooner that you can have a database response in terms for talking to these vendors to actually manage your spend correctly and to figure out what is most necessary, what is least necessary, and then to be better armed for your contract negotiations. This is the primary thing that you can do to be prepared for the rest of 2020. And I can't state this enough because there aren't enough companies out there doing this right now. It's easy to get overwhelmed with this is a very stressful environment. It's tough to figure out what you should do next. Well, I'm telling you, this is what you need to do next. You need to benchmark your March and April spend right now and figure out how those usage patterns are comparing to the past. And as part of that, you need to also work with your expense management and accounting teams that are dealing with expense reports, purchasing cards, and all of that sneaky shadow IT and bring your own IT stuff that is coming into play to get a full idea of what this actually looks like. This is the time to figure out what's going on. I can't emphasize this enough. Second, so before you get there, use free offerings. So for instance, G2 Track, many of us know about G2 as a software review company. They also have a SaaS management solution, and they are giving away 90 days of their G2 Track solution to help businesses manage software costs. Definitely worth looking into free offerings that are available in these times. Of course, it's much easier to make a case to do something when it costs nothing to do. So please look at this and any other offers that you see. This is the one that I'm most aware of at this point. Step 2, prepare for tough negotiations. So it's easy to say, oh, we've got to cut costs. I'm going to go directly to the vendor and give them my mind and show them what's happening. But here's the thing, with tough negotiations, you have to be willing to walk away or to be able to cut the vendor off in that worst case scenario. And we are in a worst case scenario. I mean, with 20% of the workforce out of a job, GDP going down, this is as bad as it gets. At least I hope it's as bad as it gets. I hope it doesn't get worse. But to prepare for these tough negotiations, first, you've got to know what your spend portfolio looks like. You've got to know what that distribution of spend looks like, and which software is actually providing the most contribution to your spend. You've got to know that shape of that. For each of those top accounts, look at this middle part. Choose a credible threat for each account. You need to have a backup application that you can point to that you are fairly certain can do that same job. That is a reference point for negotiations, and it also provides a worst case scenario backup for you to go to if things fall apart with your primary vendor. And then on the right-hand side, back up your data regularly. You want to be prepared to either be able to back up your data or to move your data to another solution if necessary. This is just prepping. I'm not saying you should get ready to move all of your data and all of your applications to other vendors. But this is the worst case scenario, and if something does go wrong in your negotiations, you want to be prepared beforehand rather than get cut off randomly at any given time without having done this prior preparation. Step 3, executive contact with large accounts. So once you decide to go out to these accounts and start asking for change, you can go and do it yourself. But from my experience, both having done this actually having been on the vendor side in 2000 and then having been on the IT side in 2008, what I found was more useful was to work with your CFO and your legal department on committed outreach. You provide some sort of documentation from your executive team saying, we are reviewing our spend for all of our major accounts in light of these difficult times. It's a recession, it's a global pandemic, obviously, 20% unemployment. Obviously, things are happening right now. So work with your executive team to be able to send out this type of a note to your major providers and make it fairly standardized. You don't want to play either favorites or bully anybody specifically, but you want to point out, that these vendors have been partners. We're going through tough times. We're reviewing spend across the board. And then escalate that conversation as well. You want to make sure you're not just working with your traditional sales and account team, as fantastic as I'm sure they are. You want to escalate that up the company to make sure that you're having at least an executive to executive understanding of what's going on. The details, yes, will come down to your level at the end of the day to negotiate what is happening and to figure out what you can get. But you want to make sure that you have executive stakeholders on both sides to be able to bring up the problems that may be above your pay grade. Be prepared for that as a starting point. Okay, so now that we've talked about how to get prepared for this and where to start, think about what are you actually asking for? Delaying, discounting, denying, because here's the thing. Subscription businesses are highly incentivized to keep your business. This is just a chart showing how SaaS companies think about the payback period from customer acquisition. And you can see that the biggest bar here is 13 to 18 months, meaning it takes them 13 to 18 months, kind of that medium point, just to get the money back from getting you as a customer. And you see there's 19 to 24 months, there's 2 years, there's over 3 years. So a majority of these companies are not built to simply churn out accounts over the first year. Once they have your business, it's really in their best interest to maintain some sort of cash flow or some sort of future cash flow to keep you on board. Now, that's just how SaaS works. Everybody builds their SaaS business models based on this assumption that it's going to take 2 years, 3 years to actually get your money back, and you have to treat your customers like gold to get there. And in these times, it's often worth their time to make some sort of concession for a long-term help. So, I would say that there's kind of this, two-sided strategy that you're looking at here. On the left side, starting with this win-win approach that because SaaS vendors need profitable customers, you can offer to do several things. You can offer to lengthen your contract. You can serve as a customer reference. You can build tighter relationships by perhaps actively introducing their account team to other stakeholders within your organization that may be interested in the product. So, that's going to be an interesting, there's this interesting kind of quid pro quo that you can do there where you are giving them something in return that will likely help their long-term health. On the right side, I'm sorry that this hasn't rendered very well. I'll provide a PDF of this after the event, but there's this also second side of getting tough, where you want to figure out what can you actually do to in terms of tactics. And the three tactics below are, one is around delaying payments and audits, asking, can we put this off to any degree? Can we do a 3-month, 6-month vacation where we are simply pushing off the end of this contract because we just can't get there? And it's at least one volley that you can throw out there. Of course, they can say no, but you never get what you don't ask for. Second of all, looking at discounting, you can also simply just ask for reduced payments, saying we can only pay this much at this time. Our cash flow looks like this. You're going to have to open up your books a little bit and show what has happened from an expense perspective, likely to be able to get something, either of these tactics done, because obviously you're not just, vendors can't just give away their software just because you want a discount. But if you can show that there's some financial reason, as most companies can right now, there's a good reason to be able to move forward and be able to make some sort of compromise in that regard. And then the far right talks about disputing excess capacity and unknown charges. So of course, this is also a time to start looking at what you've been using and figure out how you might be able to dispute anything that looks odd, be it actual usage, be it specific licenses, specific overages, specific contract terms. This is definitely a time to understand what you've bought and see whether your actual SaaS usage aligns to that correctly or not. So step 5, reining employees in. So this has been obviously very difficult to do over the past decade, both from a SaaS and a mobility perspective. But it's important to rein employees in and start standardizing SaaS apps, because in step 4, when you go back to your vendor, one of the big things that you have to provide from a muscle perspective is the amount of spend that you actually are able to provide, the number of accounts that you're able to provide at the end of the day. And the more you're able to provide, the better off you'll be from a negotiating perspective. So, part of this is just telling employees the SaaS party's over. I know you love choosing whatever you want from an application perspective, but these are different times, and we need to aggregate spend to be able to do the right things for our company overall. So figure out, to the extent possible, as we go up across the top row, there's an app for that, not 10 apps for that. Figure out if there's the opportunity to consolidate apps, and then ditch the niche long tail, at least for right now. This isn't the time for everybody to choose their own separate vendor just because they enjoy it 1% more, when there's actual money and actual jobs at stake. Who wants to be that person who says it's more important for me to have a UI a user interface that is slightly nicer, or is something that I'm used to, rather than something that is 99% similar and can actually save costs at the end of the day. Then on the bottom, you can see categorizing apps as priority, luxury, and vanity, as well as defensible ROI and productivity gains. So to go into that a little bit more, when you think about these buckets of priority, luxury, and vanity, what I'm thinking of here, you can see on the left side, priority apps, mission critical, well-articulated value. And I think this value is important in that you need to be able to actually draw out an ROI or figure out qualitatively why this app is absolutely essential to your workflows and your productivity. You need to be able to, may not be able to put a number to it, but you do need to be able to say what that value is, and it needs to be well established in terms that are understandable by the business. And then they're typically broadly adopted. When you look in the middle, luxury apps, these are still productive apps typically, and they typically facilitate work, but their value may not be quite as easy to describe, and they might have niche adoption or only be one of several solutions that are used to do that same type of task within your organization. And then on the right, vanity apps, frankly, there's a number of these as well, apps that are nice to have or interesting to have, but can't really be described in terms of the value that they provide to the business. So it's important to get these buckets of apps, understand what your SaaS portfolio looks like from that regard, not from a 2019 perspective when business was much easier, but right now, April, May 2020 perspective, when we really need to make priorities and we have to figure out which vendors are worth negotiating with and keeping and which ones can potentially be cut. So step 6, renegotiating contracts. So this is a time to start thinking about all the aspects of spend that have changed, whether it's reconsidering spend and license minimums within your contract, looking at your scheduled audits, looking at peak and valley exceptions for either having overages or dropping below a certain amount of spend or number of licenses or amount of usage. Figure out what you can do to minimize risk from that perspective and to be able to manage your cash correctly. On the right side, you can see you're shifting from per user to other business models. There may be an opportunity to create savings opportunities by looking at non-traditional spend patterns. You might have the opportunity to look at an application by using it as a use case or as an embedded application in some way that gets rid of the traditional per user scaling and replaces it with something that is more cost efficient because SaaS is branching out into a number of different type of pricing models. So check and see if there's an opportunity to be able to work with that. Next, look at the bottom row, leeway on payment terms and financing. You definitely want to be able to manage cash and see if there are opportunities for financing. A number of large technology companies are putting literally billions of dollars into financing to help customers because they know this is a tough time. It's much easier to be able to figure out how to pay for it later when we assume that business is going to turn around rather than try to pay for everything up front right now. Obviously, cash is at a premium right now. Everybody knows this, and these companies want to keep your business, SaaS companies more than any other. So this is a real opportunity here too. And then on the bottom right, there's always acts of God or type of clauses that allow you to opt out of certain responsibilities. So you want to see if there's some sort of COVID specific timing or some sort of quarantine specific clause or some sort of act of God clause that allows you to at least give you some flexibility during this time until the literal states of emergency that exist right now are turned off. Make sure that and this is good just from a general risk management perspective, but you definitely want to make sure that those terms are in there and that they give you some sort of actual flexibility. It's easy to have a vague clause simply saying that this contract may be terminated or may be voided due to acts of God. But what does that really mean without any additional language or information? This is another opportunity to work with, obviously, procurement, legal, finance, in terms of figuring out what would you actually want in this situation? What do you want in this situation right now? What is missing from contracts that is making your life more difficult? And actually put that language in, or at least have some sort of addendum, or see if you can at least get halfway with your vendors in that regard. So those are my key tips for cleaning up SaaS in a recessionary environment. On the left-hand side here, disrupt your SaaS environment, clean it up, make sure that you have visibility to your inventory, your usage, and then being able to optimize both your categories and your use of each application. And then on the right side here, my 6 key tips for actually doing something about this in 2020. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today for this quick hit on SaaS management. Hope this has been useful. Of course, this is just a starting point for the future. And I'm looking forward to sharing more with you over the next few weeks. This June 11th date is obviously, as I said at the beginning of this webinar, probably going to change, and I will let you know as that changes. If you have any questions about past webinars, this current webinar, future webinar, or the virtual event that we'll be having this summer, please get in contact with us. And with that, thank you so much for showing up today. Have a great day.